Hey everybody, Chapter 1, Section 7, titled The Distributive Property, starts on page 46. We're going to do this one in two parts. Here's the first part. First of all, definition. The word distribute means to pass out or to give one to everybody. So if I was going to distribute a set of worksheets, I would give one to each person in the class. The distributive property means that you take one number and give it to all the other numbers in the problem. Okay, we'll do some examples of those in a second. The distributive property always has a multiplication part, and then there's an addition or subtraction part that comes in parentheses. It always kind of looks the same. You're going to be able to recognize it. We're going to use it quite a bit the rest of the year. And a lot of times I'm just going to write a problem up on the board and say, what does this look like? And you'll be able to say, well, it looks like the distributive property. Because the distributive property always looks like this, a couple different ways. There can be a number in front, in this case that would be the A, and then there's going to be a B plus C in parentheses. It can look like this, where the number on the outside is actually at the end instead of in front. You can also have it with subtraction instead of addition. But distributive property always looks like two things inside parentheses, one thing on the outside. Here's how the distributive property works in a problem. The directions would say simplify 5 times x plus 7. Now, the 5 is on the outside, and the 5 is what I'm going to pass out to the other two numbers. So I'm going to give the 5 to the x, and I use these little loops when I do distributive property just to help me remember. So I'm going to give the 5 to the x, and I get 5 times x. I'm going to give the 5 to the 7, and I get 5 times 7. The sign that's in the middle of the parentheses stays in the middle of the problem. That's why we have a plus sign in the middle. Okay? So I gave the 5 to both parts of the problem, the x and the 7. And now I simplify. 5 times x just stays 5x. 5 times 7 is 35. Now, I can't do anything to those two pieces. I can't put the 5 and the 35 together. We'll talk about why later on in this section. Another example, example 1b. You see I've got the 12 in front, and I've got the rest of the stuff inside parentheses. One thing on the outside, two things on the inside. So, I take the 12 and I give it to the 3. I take the 12 and I give it to the 1/6 x. So the minus goes in the middle, and then 12 times 1/6 x. So I took the 12 and I gave it to both pieces on the inside. Now I simplify. 12 times 3 is 36. 12 times 1/6. Remember, multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. 12 is really 12 over 1. So I do 12 times 1, and I get 12. 1 times 6, and I get 6. And then the x stays where it is. And I can simplify that fraction. 12 divided by 6 is 2. Okay? That'll be our answer for that one. Next example. This time, the thing that's on the outside is actually at the end instead of the beginning. But the process is the same. I take the 3 and I give it to the 0.4. I take the 3 and I give it to the 1.1 st. Okay? Then I simplify. 3 times 0.4 is 1.2. 3 times 1.1 is 3.3. Now, there's one more thing I'm going to do to this problem. If you have something that has a variable, you're going to actually put that piece in front. Put the thing with the variable in front of the plain number. Since it's addition, I'm allowed to switch those two things around, because addition works with the commutative property. Remember, the commutative property changes the order? So I'm allowed to take the 3.3c and put it in front, and the 1.2 and put it in the back. So that's what my answer would be. Another example, 2y minus 1 times a negative y. Okay? So I'm going to take that negative y, that's the thing that's by itself, and I'm going to give it to the other parts. So I'm going to give the negative y to the 2y, and I'm going to give the negative y to the negative 1. And we end up with this. 2y times the negative y. The negative sign comes down in the middle, and then 1 times negative y. I'm going to simplify those. Y times y is actually y squared, and the negative times the 2 comes in front. This is negative 1 times negative y. Negative times a negative gives me a positive, and 1 times y is just y. New topic. You can also use distributive property to help you rewrite things that look like messy fractions. Okay. Here's an example of a problem. If this is a fraction, there's 2 things on top, 1 thing on the bottom. If I have 2 things on top and 1 thing on the bottom, I can split it up into 2 parts. So I do 4x with the 3 on the bottom, and I do 16 with the 3 on the bottom. The sign that's in the middle of the original problem is a negative sign, so it stays as a negative sign in the middle of this. Next, if possible, I would simplify those, but I can't simplify either one of those fractions. I can just leave them as mixed numbers. Okay? Another one of those. 1 thing on the bottom, 2 things on the top. So I split it up into 2 pieces, 11 over 6, and 3x over 6. The number in the middle of the original, or the sign in the middle of the original problem is plus, so the sign in the middle there is a plus. And now I simplify if possible. I can't simplify 11 over 6, but I can simplify 3 over 6. 3 over 6 turns into 1/2. The x stays on top. Okay. 2 more examples in this part. Same process. 2 things on top, 1 thing on the bottom, so I can split them up. And this becomes 15 over 12, 6x over 12, and the plus sign stays in the middle. I can simplify both of those. 15 over 12, I can take a 3 out, and I get 5 over 4. 6 over 12, I can take a 6 out, and I get 1x over 2, because 6 over 12 is 1/2. Last one of those examples. This one has a minus in the middle, but I can do 4 over 8, and then 2x over 8, minus sign stays in the middle, and I can simplify both of those fractions. 4 over 8, I can take a 4 out of both of those, and I get 1/2. 2 over 8, I can take a 2 out of both of those, and I get 1 over 4, and the x stays up on top. Okay. It's the end of the first part of the lesson. Practice problems, page 50, numbered 9 through 31 odd. We'll come back for part B.